All right, so quick gut check before we start. How much debt do you think Michael Jackson had when he died? Court filings that came out years later put the number at over $500 million, $500 million, owed to more than 65 different creditors. Now here's the part that should stop you. Today, his estate is worth well over $1 billion, and for over a decade running, Forbes has ranked him as the single highest-earning dead celebrity on the planet. Not close either. Some years he's out-earned every other name on that list combined. So somehow somebody figured out how to turn a man $500 million in debt into one of the richest deceased people in entertainment history. That's genuinely one of the wildest financial turnarounds you'll ever hear about. And it starts with a decision he made in 1985 that basically nobody understood at the time. Back in 1985, Jackson did something that reportedly stunned people close to him, including, famously, Paul McCartney. He bought ATV Music Publishing, a company that owned the publishing rights to a massive catalog of songs, including a huge chunk of the Beatles' catalog, for about $47.5 million. McCartney had reportedly mentioned to Jackson years earlier, almost casually, how valuable buying up song catalogs could be, and then was reportedly stunned when Jackson went and outbid everyone, including Paul himself, for exactly that kind of asset. Whether that stung their friendship the way tabloids like to claim is genuinely debated, but the business move itself is undisputed. That catalog eventually merged with Sony's music publishing arm to form Sony/ATV. And this deal is the seed that everything else in this story grows out of. Fast forward to the 2000s, and Jackson's personal finances were a mess. By the mid-2000s, he'd reportedly closed the main house at Neverland Ranch as a cost-cutting move. He'd reportedly taken out massive loans, including one reported around $270 million, secured against his stake in that same music publishing catalog. By the time he died in 2009, court documents that surfaced years later showed his estate was carrying more than $500 million in debt. For a guy who'd sold hundreds of millions of albums, that's a genuinely staggering number. And it's the exact opposite of the secretly a billionaire image a lot of fans assumed. So the estate's executors, John Branca and John McClain, inherited essentially a financial disaster with a famous name attached to it. And here's where it gets almost unbelievable. Instead of collapsing under that debt, the estate started aggressively monetizing everything it had: the music catalog, film and TV rights, Cirque du Soleil shows built around his music, posthumous releases, and paying the debt down fast. In 2016, the estate sold Jackson's remaining half of Sony/ATV back to Sony, in a deal reportedly worth around $750 million. And then, in 2024, Sony came back for more, acquiring a major additional stake in Jackson's full catalog, in a deal that valued the whole thing at somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 billion, depending on the reporting. That's widely described as one of the largest music catalog transactions in history for a single artist. Let that sink in for a second. An estate that started $500 million in the hole has now generated deals worth well over $2 billion combined in less than 15 years. Here's a chapter most fans have never heard of. In 2013, the IRS audited Jackson's estate tax return and came back with a jaw-dropping claim. They said the estate had undervalued his assets, specifically his image and likeness, and his stakes in Sony/ATV and his MyJack publishing company, by roughly $500 million, and hit the estate with almost $200 million in penalties on top of that. The estate's own filing had reportedly valued Jackson's image and likeness at just a few $1,000s at the time of his death, arguing that after the molestation allegations and years of tabloid coverage, his brand was essentially worthless as a standalone asset. The IRS said that number was absurd. This fight dragged through tax court for nearly a decade, and in May 2021, the U.S. tax court finally ruled and split the difference dramatically in the estate's favor, valuing those disputed assets at around $111 million, less than a quarter of what the IRS had originally claimed. It's a genuinely strange footnote. Years after his death, courts were still literally debating what Michael Jackson's name was worth in dollars. Now, not everything post-death was a straightforward financial win. Some of it was just a lot. In May 2014, at the Billboard Music Awards, the estate unveiled a hologram of Jackson performing "Slave to the Rhythm," built over roughly 5 months of production. The internet reaction was split right down the middle. Some viewers called it incredible, a genuine "he's still the king" moment. Others found it, in their words, creepy, unsettling, even worse than anything in the Thriller video. It's worth noting reports have suggested the hologram was built using a performer as a live motion reference, rather than Jackson himself, which only added to the uncanny reaction for a lot of viewers. Whatever you think of it, it's a perfect example of the tension running through this entire era. An estate constantly weighing, will this make money and honor the legacy, against, is this going to feel exploitative? And then there's Neverland itself. Jackson had actually already sold it to an investment firm back in 2007, 2 years before his death, while he was defaulting on payments. So technically, he didn't even own it when he died. In the years after, it hit the market repeatedly. $100 million asking price in 2016, cut to $67 million in 2018, down to $31 million by 2019 after being rebranded as Sycamore Valley Ranch. It finally sold in 2021 for $22 million to billionaire Ron Burkle, a longtime friend and former financial advisor to Jackson. A property once valued at $100 million, sold for a fraction of that. Even in an era of billion-dollar catalog deals, not everything in this story went up in value. So here's where this actually leaves us. A man who reportedly died $500 million in debt now sits at the center of one of the most valuable posthumous entertainment empires ever built. While his childhood home sold for pennies on the dollar, his face became a debated hologram, and the government spent a decade arguing with his estate about what his own name was worth. It's honestly one of the strangest afterlives in celebrity history. Impressive, uncomfortable, and unresolved all at once. If you haven't seen it yet, the story of the allegations that have followed him for 30 years, including the lawsuit still active right now, is linked below. Subscribe for more stories that happened in the news.